If Paul George never gets traded to the Oklahoma City Thunder, the entire league of today would be unrecognizable. The Thunder and Pacers in 2017 both took big swings in the superstar trade. But what would they look like today if it didn't happen? What would happen to Russ, to George, to Carmelo Anthony of all people? I think by the end of this video, some of you might be surprised who would have been winners if this never happened. But before we get to that, we have to set the stage. It's 2017. The Warriors are in the middle of their dynastic run. LeBron James is a young and dominating 32-year-old, and Russell Westbrook just pulled off one of the most narratively compelling MVP wins of all time. Never had we seen a player of Durant's caliber go join a team that had just finished with the greatest regular season ever. After being one win away from the NBA Finals, KD joined the team that eliminated him and Russ. Fans were in an uproar about the move. Apparently so was Westbrook. He put the entire Thunder roster on his back and averaged a triple-double for the first time since Oscar Robertson. OKC made the playoffs but was eliminated in the first round by another former teammate, James Harden. So Russ picked up the phone and told the Thunder to make something happen, or he's out. The deal was Victor Oladipo and Domantas Sabonis in exchange for Paul George. Small setup. Now, remember, this is 2017. Oladipo had yet to have his all-NBA season, and Sabonis was far from looking like a multi-time All-Star. Initially, most people hated this trade for Indiana. Yes, Paul George had said he'd most likely walk in free agency, so the Pacers had to do something. But no one was seeing the breadcrumbs the front office saw potential. It would turn into one of the biggest win-win trades for two franchises in recent memory. The Pacers get to stay relevant while the Thunder try to keep Russ happy and try to contend. But if it never happens, do those two statements still happen? So what happens to OKC? Well, to start with the Thunder, I think it actually does. The bigger question is, would that have been good for the franchise in the long run? If Presti never got George, would he bother also bringing in Carmelo? OKC would have kept Enes, Candace, Doug McDermott, but most importantly, their 2018 second-round pick via Chicago. Sorry, Chicago fans, but did you realize this pick ended up being Mitchell Robinson? Not only did the Bulls blunt another trade, but the Thunder could have drafted a defensive anchor destined to replace Steven Adams. And then as far as Russ needing help goes, if the team kept putting time and effort into developing and integrating Oladipo and Sabonis, that could have been some great help. During Sabonis' time at OKC, he was relegated as a stretch forward next to Adams. But maybe they trade Adams down the line, unlock Sabonis at the 5, and then when they defense play Robinson. Russ, Sabonis, Westbrook, Mitchell Robinson, what could have been? Russ was still a speedster back then, so Sabonis' playmaking abilities could have also found him on every cut to the basket. And as far as Oladipo goes, at the time, he struggled to find his footing after Orlando and now here. But for the longest time, OKC partnered Russ in the backcourt with defensive specialist Andre Robertson, a shooting guard who averaged more than 2 3-point shot attempts only twice in his career. Of the 2 seasons, his highest percentage was 24% from behind the arc. Meanwhile, Oladipo has shot as high as 41% for a season during his career. And if you want defense, he led the league in steals per game his first season at Indiana. Maybe it was clunky at first, but you can't tell me that could have been a super exciting backcourt if things had gone differently. OKC either gets Russ help the organic way with the likes of Oladipo, Sabonis, Robinson, and don't forget a young Jeremy Grant was on this roster too, or they package this all for a different star. Reports at the time showed Presti was calling about Butler in Chicago as well. If they held out, Jimmy would have exploded on the Timberwolves in practice the following year, and the team would be ready with their package to bring in their other hard-nosed competitor. Honestly, that might have really worked. Imagine the team energy with Russ and Butler in their primes on the same team. So it seems like OKC would have ended up fine either way. But when you zoom out beyond the Russ era, it's much bleaker. I'm not sure you could ever stumble into a sweeter deal than the one that sent Paul George to the Clippers. SGA and the makings of a war chest of picks. Some have already had big-time impacts like Jalen Williams. If the Thunder went a different route, they might have never gotten to jumpstart or rebuild. So I guess it's safe to say all is well ends well for OKC. Now, what about the Pacers? Meanwhile, the Pacers try to do the same thing with their Paul George trade. Clearly, the team was not ever going to get past LeBron, and PG expressed that he was going to try and force his way to LA in whatever way he could. So the big question is for Indiana, if Presti didn't call, do they make a trade with the Lakers? Because 2017 was not the same league as is today when it comes to superstar trades. It's almost routine now for a player to request a trade and get to go to one of the 2 teams they wanted. So if this was just a few years later, George would have probably gotten his way. The Lakers were pretty much a garbage fire back then and only had a few young pieces to trade Indiana. D'Angelo Russell, Brandon Ingram, and Julius Randle were all within their first 2 seasons in the league. not really the names that jump off the page anymore in 2024. Randall had a single All-NBA team appearance like Oladipo. Sure, but Ingram has yet to truly pop as people projected. Surprisingly enough, I would almost argue that D'Angelo Russell is the most interesting of the three. Think about it. When he got traded to Brooklyn, he was a key figure in rebuilding that culture and finding unlikely success, which turned the team from a joke to attractive enough to bring in Kyrie and KD. What if Indiana had some sort of big culture switch with Russell Ingram and Miles Turner? Could they have then been a suitor for Russ or Butler, LeBron to Indiana? That is obviously crazy talk, but you get where I'm going with this. The key dilemma the Pacers hypothetical is facing is that without Sabonis, there's no Halliburton trade, a player that, in all these talks, is second only to Paul George. The Pacers would have had the short end of stick losing Paul George possibly to the Lakers, never getting Sabonis and Oladipo, bringing them to another crucial rebuilding year. In the short term, it feels like the Thunder could have been better off holding on to their pieces. But then in the long term, they would have missed out on the desperation that is Clippers basketball that led to OKC having one of the youngest talented teams headed by SGA and now with an astounding role player in Alex Caruso. So meanwhile, for Indiana, the initial George trade doesn't even matter. It's about getting the desperate Sacramento Kings on the phone and asking for their future Olympian point guard. So what's the lesson in all this? It was never about the Indiana Thunder trade. The real treasure was the desperate teams that called along the way who truly won all of this. The Clippers at some point ended up having PG, Russ, Kawhi, and Harden, which was still not enough to win a title, but that's for another video. While Sacramento having Fox, and Sabonis snapping a 16-year curse of not making the playoffs in 2023 and also eliminating the Golden State Warriors in the play-in tournament in 2024, leading to the end of the Warriors dynasty and setting us up for the new era of basketball. But what do you think? Leave a comment below about what scenario might have happened if Paul George hadn't gotten sent to OKC. Also, if you like this video, think about giving it a thumbs up and hitting subscribe.